Hello everybody, so today we're going to explain the BWV 696 here, and its name as Christum via sollen, loben, schon here. So this name is actually originated from this poem here, because that's where it is a cantata here, and then he wrote it for the Orgelbüchlein here, which is like the little organ book here. So now we can first look at the poem here. So the poem is actually just about like the birth of Christ here, the Jesus Christ here. And then here, Eustace J.S. Bach, he used this poem, which was written by Martin Luther in the 16th century. Luther in the 16th century here, and because J.S. Bach actually believed in God there, and he devoted a lot of pieces to him as well. So he actually used this, we could say took this poem, and then we wrote a piece out of it here. And then, why is that part of his Orgelbüchlein here? As we all know today, that's why Orgelbüchlein is a little bit like the little organ beginner book here. And then, because the Orgelbüchlein is based on the church system, which is like the church calendar. So this was based on the Christ, like the God calendar here, in which every day is like a different kind of event there. And it so happens on that day in which Bach actually wrote it, it was actually the birth of Christ here. So this piece is actually the birth of Christ. So this was just Bach. And this is about the birth of Christ, of Jesus. So actually this was using the church calendar, or we call it the godly calendar here. So he will also actually write it for the Orgelbüchlein here. Also that's why it's very easy, so that we can play in different kind of churches. And using that church system, we can, because a lot of cities of it, we don't have this kind of professional kind of organist like J.S. Bach did. So he wrote this kind of easier one for those who want to learn organ, or for those churches who do not have professional organists here. So you will find that in every piece of the Orgelbüchlein, there's also like pretty easy there compared to this kind of harder pieces that J.S. Bach also wrote there. And actually, Bach actually just wrote it here, so we can see that there's a lot of much more easier pieces compared to the harder pieces that J.S. Bach also wrote there. So we can see that if we put up the score of this little piece here, it's only 3 lines here, and we don't have any pedals here. And this edition is by Master Dupre here, which I really like because they already have the fingerings there, and the fingers are also very suitable there. So there are just 3 lines, and there's no pedals. The pedals are there for like the smaller kind of organs, but even for harpsichord. So that can be played on many instruments at that time. Also, in fact, that at that time every single city has its like tune there, so that every time we play this kind of piece is different here, because every kind of piece of city, the tune is different. Some might use 4/4-2, or some might use even lower 4/3-8. So we could see that that's why it's pretty easy. So that's why we could qualify it in this little organ book here. Besides, in fact, that Bach was also a teacher here. So as a teacher, maybe I could say maybe, but we cannot have evidence to say for sure. Maybe Bach actually used it for his teaching purposes here. So he also teaches here, and then he actually published it into the church, so that we could, everybody knows to like how to admire the poems and church pieces of it like here. And this poem is very famous at that time there. So this poem was well known for everybody at that time. So using this little well-known poem, we can actually know that, okay, Bach is actually trying to let people actually understand the organ here by using well-known poems so everybody can enjoy this kind of piece or this kind of moment that he actually wrote it for, because in the other cities, maybe they don't have a pipe organ, or they have, but they can't play it. Also, if they just use only one stop here, as was the pre-noted here, I tried it out, but my preference is to use 2 8 stops. One principal, one flute. This time it will be not too soft or too mushy here. So these two will be like this kind of morning sound. I suspect that that's why, as in the daylight time, that you wake up and then this kind of da 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 you can chant, like it's kind of like a Gregorian chant for me like that, because it's very low and morning. And then for this piece here, we know that it's very well known there, so they only use for the pipe organ here. And there was a popular church as well there. And by the way, the organ that might be written on this piece is this one. This one is likely the one that Jasper actually wrote it for there. So this one is the Strophma. This one, and this is the Strophma Church, in which it houses this organ here with only one manual and one pedal here. And you can really see that from this chart, we don't know why Bach did not write any pedals to it. But it's a little bit just too small for it as well there. And then if we look at the score here, we can actually try and get it along there. We might see that first we have the S here, which means the subject. And I suspect that it's a little bit like a fugue, a little kind of earlier this kind of fugue here, because we have a subject and a response, and it's already this kind of fugue there. And then, actually, I'm going to talk a little bit, extend the point about the fugue is that if we already talked about the subject and response, then we should know what is that there. So subject is actually like what we actually want to talk is that, okay, if the subject is like, say for instance, do, re, mi, and then if the response is di, re, do, and the response is di, do. And then for the fugue here, we will actually go on here. So happens now. So that's what's going on. Da 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 da. We have a theme for subject. So as subject going on along. And that's the response in the fifth higher up here, because the first one is in the this one. And then the second one is just on top. See? So we can see that actually if we actually measure the intervals between them, it's actually a fifth in between them. There's a fifth higher up there. So maybe we could call this already just kind of simpler fugue, in which we have a simpler kind of fugue that is really this kind of kind, in which we call it the canon there. And then the canon is just repeating these lines, but at different kind of paces. So that means that it's going to always have this kind of space in between that there. Like for instance, one bar or one beat there. So let's see how it goes. So we can see all the way here, re, so, fa, mi, do as well. And da, re, do, si, la. Oh yeah, all the way to here. We can see that if we analyze the subject here, it's ready to re, so, fa, mi, do. But that's actually the whole thing, the whole subject that is all about here. And this happens to be if we put it into words, it's supposed to be the Christum, sollen, loben, schon, the first phrase of the first half sentence, the first half sentence of this poem here. So this is what we can find throughout the piece at different pitches here. So doing that, the choir is going to, because this is a chant, and the choir is going to sing this kind of poem here using this kind of melody there. And then, and you follow the blue arrows there. Then we can hear the da 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 da. So this one is also the response here, and then this, the subject repeats again. See? The subject also appears again, and then if we go on, da 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 da, this is the response again. And then we have the subject appearing right here again. And all of the in between here, because we know that there are some bars in between which that we don't have any subject or response. That's the development part, sort of a little development. Even though it has no pedals, but we can actually not transcribe, but we can actually play that into the pedal, because Bach at the Baroque time, this is the 5 score that we have, and then the notes will always be at the bottom of it there. If we see notes that are in the bottom, like here, then this will be the pedal notes here. Or if our hand is large enough, then we can actually use our hands as well to play them there. Because see, that's why we can catch up with the little rest here, and then we play the D and C with our right hand here, because our right hand can actually get the rest here, and then we can play it there. So as we can see there, this one for the maybe pedals, maybe if there's any wrong with it there, if the right hand can catch up with it as well there. So at last we have the last thing of the subject here. And after subject, all we have is the following notes here. Da dee da dee da da da. And then see right ba 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 be. And then the final cadence is here. That's what da mi a b. It's on E major here. But it's actually in D here. It started on D. But surprisingly here is that it is in C major, or we could say in C major or C minor here, but because it has no flat and sharp there. And interesting is that it starts on D there. So we could say it's a D minor, but Bach did not use the D minor kind of style. Or we could say that Bach actually used the D melodic minor, because see, what is this? This one is the harmonic minor for it, because it should be B flat, because D minor is the relative minor to F major. See? And F major has a B flat, so D minor must have a B flat as well. But if we have the melodic, then we can put the B flat into a B natural here. So that's why it's very useful as like the one that we can say that it is a D minor here, D melodic minor here. And then after we analyze that there, now we're going to talk about style of it here. So this kind of style is called chorale prelude there. And this kind of chorale prelude is that chorale choir is singing behind of you, and you are tasked to actually accompany the choir here. So if I draw the diagram, a very loose diagram here, is that if this is a church there, then no, it should be bigger. If this is the church, and we are about here, then the choir must be there, but this one will be the audience there. So with the choir singing da 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 da, words are there, the poem there, then we can see then this little diagram there, we can see that we are actually going to accompany them, because all of it there, the choir is the melody. And then this is the organ here. So we can see that this one is a little bit of diagram that will be used to Bach as we hear it there. So that's why as what actually Bach wrote there, and this is what actually Bach wrote for most of his Orgelbüchlein there. So this is what Bach maybe wrote for all of it, or this is the idea that Bach had in mind while Bach is actually writing the organ pitch line. And the last thing that we're going to talk about is why did Bach choose for this style, or why did Bach actually use the style in most of his organ pitch line there. Well, this part goes back to Bach's history because Bach was in Vienna at the time. And then Vienna, he worked as like the choir master, and he spent his time also working on the organ here and composing for the organ there. So for the organ, for this kind of choral preludes, and we don't need a lot of things there, and also things he was an expert in, so he wrote it. And also the thing about the organ prelude, the choral prelude, is that we don't need any skills. Well, we don't need that much skills as an organ solo here, because the choral prelude, we just need to accompany the little choir here behind us. So that means that the melody of it here is not in the choir, it's not in our, but it's actually in the choir there. So that's why we call it a choir prelude, choir melody, because they're going to sing the poem for whatever poem there is, because the poem is based on the melody there. So that's all we're going to talk about in the BWV 699-96 here, with the Christum via sollen, loben, schon here. So now, hope you enjoy it, and now let's look at the performance video. And finally, let's read this poem together then. So first of all, it's Christum via sollen, loben, schon. Der reine Markt machen schon, weit die liebe Sonne liegt, und ein aller wird eingereicht. Here. And the English translation for it is, now let us praise Christ, the Son of the pure Virgin Mary, as far as the dear sun shines and reaches to the end of all the world here. So that's the poem that was written by Martin Luther in the 16th century there. And that's it for this video about the BWV 696 here of Christum via sollen, loben, schon there. And now let's go into playing it, and hope you enjoy it.